So tonight we're going to start the Haftorah of Tisha B'Av itself, because I hustled through Shabbos Chazon over the last couple of nights, so we're going to learn one of the grimmest Haftorahs that we learn all year. It is harsh and doom-filled, as one would expect from Yirmiyahu, but unlike the first Haftorahs we learned from Yirmiyahu in the Shiva de Peranusa, the Shlosha de Peranusa, Parak Aleph and Beis, where there was a little bit of hope at the end, there is almost no hope whatsoever in the Haftorah of Tisha B'Av. Allegedly, there's a different Sephardic Haftorah for Tisha B'Av, but I couldn't find it. An email just went out from Kingsway telling people about the minhagim of the 9 days as we prepare for Tisha B'Av. Not washing, not eating meat, all of the different things that we do to try to show mourning and prepare ourselves. In the 3 weeks, we go from a lightest level of mourning with the 3 weeks themselves, starting from Shivasar B'Tammuz, where it's along the lines of the 11 months that a child mourns for a parent who passed away. So there's certain restrictions, but they're relatively minimal. And then the 9 days, we move up a notch into the Shloshim as we get closer and closer to the Churban. And then on Tisha B'Av itself, it is like the Shiva that one sits. We're sitting Shiva for the Beis HaMikdash, as well as for all of the other tragedies that happened to the Jewish people over the millennia. And Tisha B'Av itself starts off very intense at night and in the morning, and then at Chatzos, on Tisha B'Av day, at around 1 o'clock, things throttle back again to the Shloshim level. So where at the beginning of Tisha B'Av, we don't sit on chairs, and we don't do the 5 Inuyim, and we try to be in a state of absolute mourning. After Chatzos, we can distract ourselves a little bit more. We can sit normally. We can put on tefillin for those men who put on tefillin every day on a daily basis. And then when Tisha B'Av ends, some of the restrictions stay in place until the 10th of Av. But this year, that's interesting because it comes out on a Friday. Now, I found a really interesting article from the Jewish Action that I was looking at called Sephardic Keynote, Exploring Moroccan Tradition, by a woman named Barbara Ben Sassan, who I believe my in-laws have worked with and certainly know pretty well. And she talks about how she married a Moroccan man, and the Jews in Morocco have a very interesting, different set of keynote. They say something along the lines of 100 keynote, almost all of them revolving around the Spanish Inquisition and the Galut, the expulsion from Spain. And so it's very interesting that they have a very different machzor for Tisha B'Av than Ashkenazim do. And almost everything is sung together, which the Ashkenazim are not great at. We only sing 2 of the keynote, 1 in the middle and 1 at the end. The Persian and Syrian Jews actually do an even shorter keynote because they didn't experience the expulsion from Spain, so they don't have that. It is interesting that most communities now learn the same Haftorah that we're about to study. And actually in Morocco, another thing that they do, and I realize this is just kind of trivia information, but they also point out that the men go and shecht a lot of meat on Tisha B'Av, or on Erev Tisha B'Av. They do a house cleaning. They change the sheets and clean the house all over North Africa. The men restock the meat supply, even though you can't eat meat until after Chatzot of the 10th of Av. As soon as Tisha B'Av is over, they shower and shave as a way of preparing for Mashiach, because of the Medrash that says the Mashiach is going to come on Tisha B'Av. So it's fascinating the way the Jewish people around the world have found different ways of marking a day of true tragedy. But the Haftorah, everybody seems to share in common. Although I did find online, I wish I could have downloaded it, a laning sample of what Sephardim do on Tisha B'Av. And it is more like a song, the way they lane this Haftorah. They also lane one pasuk in Hebrew, and then they lane it over in Ladino immediately afterwards. And because the sound file is a little iffy, so I'm not sure I can play it, but I do recommend, if you have the chance, here, I'll put it in the chat, the link to it. It's well worth checking out. It's something that we do not hear in the Ashkenazic tradition. I can also post a direct link to it up on the KJC Shiurim chat if anybody is really interested. But the Ladino isn't just a translation, but it's also a commentary. So they only have 2 or 3 psukim up on the website, but I'm going to use those a little bit as well. Having just found them 5 minutes ago, I figure why not include them in what we're going to do now. So where we start is, if you have a nach in front of you, Yirmiyahu Perek Ches. So we did Aleph and Beis. This will be in the same volume of Yirmiyahu. Some Yirmiyahus have 2 volumes because it's a lengthy book. But this is Perek Ches, so it's right in volume 1, the same as the other ones were. It's Perek Ches Pasuk Yud Gimel. And the entire Haftorah is approximately 30 psukim, so my goal is to do 10 psukim a night, tonight and tomorrow and Thursday, because we left ourselves a little bit of leeway, having finished Chazon as quickly as we did. And the entire Haftorah, except for the last 2 or 3 psukim, is laned in Eicha Trup again. I have gotten this aliyah several times in the past, because Tisha B'Av morning, everybody's a little groggy and a little slow without caffeine and without having eaten since the night before. We are lucky I suppose, in that we here in the Northern Hemisphere, Tisha B'Av goes till almost 9 o'clock at night, and it doesn't start till about 8 o'clock the previous night. So we don't go without food that much until later on in the day. In Australia, Tisha B'Av falls in the middle of the winter, and so it starts at like 4:15, 4:30 in the evening and ends at 5:30, which sounds great on Tisha B'Av afternoon, but which seems less great when you imagine how long Tisha B'Av night is. So you can really go to several shiurim about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. You could hear Rabbi Schiffman's entire 3-week version of stories from our sages telling that over. I always wonder what it's like. Rabbi Woolman told me he had a guest from Australia one year, and when he asked what time Tisha B'Av was over, and Rabbi Woolman told him 9 o'clock, the guy went nuts. He said, 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock? You know, are you people barbarians? But of course, for us, Asara B'Teves is the middle of the winter. So, you know, different calendars for different hemispheres. But here's the Haftorah, and it begins grim from the beginning, directly in Eicha Trup, because there is no, as there was in Chazon, there's no soft lead-in. It just jumps right in. And in context, the psukim before this Haftorah are really rough. Yirmiyah says in Perek Ches, why is it that the people of Yerushalayim slide back, perpetually backsliding? Meshuva nitzachas, constantly backing up. You're going to reach the point where they will take out the bones of the kings of Yehuda, and the bones of the princes, and the bones of the Kohanim, and the bones of the Nevi'im, and the bones of the Yoshei Yerushalayim, mikivreihem, from their graves. Death will be preferable to life. V'nivchar moves mechayim. And I think that is so bleak that we don't start the pasuk, we don't start the Haftorah from the beginning of that parak, because that's just a frightening way to start out. We hold on to deceit. We refuse to do tshuva. Wise men are ashamed. They are broken. They are caught. The scribes write falsely. Everybody commits robbery. Kulo botsea botza, says Pasuk Yud a few psukim before. We said already that we were very much committing robbery and falsehood in the Chazon Haftorah, but this is really rough. Lemar shalom shalom ve'ein shalom. They say peace, peace, but there is no peace. So we start Yud Gimel, Asof asifeim ne'um Hashem. Asof asifeim ne'um Hashem. I will destroy them. I will completely and utterly destroy them. A double lashon. Asof means to gather, but in this case it means I'm going to gather them into destruction. Rashi brings down a pasuk from Tzefanya, where Tzefanya says, Lashon Kaliya, Asof Asif Kol Me Al Pnei Ha'adama. God says, I'm going to destroy everybody from the face of the earth. And that's a pretty frightening beginning. Ein Anovim Bagefen. There are no grapes on the grapevine. Ve'ein Te'enim Ba'te'ena. And there are going to be no figs on the fig tree. We know I just went to a vort last night. Oh, gee. No, well, I hope it was recording all the way through. Somebody tried to do a video call on my phone, and it may have stalled everything. I went to this fort very briefly, did a quick check-in, quick check-out. It was unbelievable. And of course, everybody, Inve Hagefen and Inve Hagefen, and it's a beautiful idea of taking good, high-quality grapevines and crossbreeding them, putting them together to have beautiful offspring. And that's why some of the Mefarshim point out a Geffen is the only agricultural crop where, in a manner of speaking, certainly fruit, where you take the fruit of the vine, the grapes, and then they can be made into wine, into a completely new brio with fermentation. Wheat can be crushed down into a powder and then made into bread, but the grapes themselves are trodden directly into wine. And it's a metaphor for great Jewish people who affect the society around them. They create Talmidim, they create people who pay it forward in terms of good midos. The great Chachamim and leaders, those are the Geffen, but there will be no grapes on the Geffen. The Te'ena, hang on. The Te'ena, on the other hand, the fig, please, Esther, the fig isn't made into anything else. It's eaten as is, but at least it's nutritious. At least it's full of vitamins and minerals. So the fig is one that doesn't have a big impact on what's around it, but is nevertheless, as it were, a good citizen. That's a good, observant Jew who believes. But there are going to be no figs on the fig tree either. And finally, ve'ha'oleh novel. Even the leaves will be withered. The leaves have no eating utility whatsoever. You can't eat the leaves. They're there to protect the tree branches, perhaps. They're there to look good on the tree. But they don't contribute. And there are some members of the Jewish community who are leaves. They don't exactly spread any positivity around, but they're part of the community as well. But even they're going to be withered and gone. Va'etein lohem ya'avrun. And what I gave them so much. I gave them Torah. I gave them rules. I gave them a way of life. And they sinned through it anyway. The Radak says, I gave them so many gifts and they wasted them and threw them away. I gave them land. I gave them plenty. I gave them everything that they could want, and they're entirely consumed. And I gave them grapes and figs, and what did they do? I gave them the Torah and the Ten Commandments, and what did they do with it? Now, another point about grapes and figs is that one of the great blessings of peace to Klal Yisrael is that we will live ish tachas gafno v'tachas te'enoso. Each man living under his vineyard and fig tree. That's the image of peace for Klal Yisrael. But there will be no vineyards, there will be no fig trees during this time of Churban that's coming to Klal Yisrael. Question? Somebody had a question? Or comment? Okay. Pasuk Yudalet. Al ma anachnu yoshvim. So the people of Klal Yisrael ask, why are we sitting here? Why are we sitting still? And most of the Mefarshim say they're living in their small villages and their shtetlach, and they're not so impacted by a lot of what's happening with the conquering of the enemy, Bavel or Ashur marching through Eretz Yisrael. So they say to themselves fearfully, because sometimes the fear is worse than the actual event. You're just waiting for them to come in dreadful anticipation. So they say, let's not stay here scattered and alone. Hey, us food, let's gather together. That's ironic since we started Asof Asifim and now Hey, us food, same word. Hashem said, I'm going to use Asifa to destroy you. But we put ourselves all in the same place so that it's easier to destroy us. The man wants to run away from the Malach HaMaves. He goes all the way to Damascus. And he meets the Malach HaMaves waiting for him. And the Malach HaMaves says, I didn't expect you in Damascus. They told me to wait for you here. But I said, he lives all the way over in Lvov. Why would he be in Damascus? But unfortunately, hey asfu, when we gather in the big cities, v'navo el arei hamivtzar, and we'll come to the big fortified cities where we feel safe, v'nidma sham, and we will sit there in silence. Either sit there in silence because we think we can blend in with everybody else. Nobody will notice us. Or we'll sit there in silence and be mournful because we'll see how terrible things are in Yerushalayim and the big cities. We thought we were running to safety, like an apocalyptic movie, but instead we were running right into the jaws of danger. Ki Hashem Elokeinu hadimanu. Because Hashem, our God, has silenced us. Now all of a sudden we're davening. We'll see in a few psukim. But Hashem's not listening to the prayers. Hashem has silenced us. This is one of the big complaints in Eicha that we did last year. Vayashkenu mei rosh. He gave us poisoned water to drink. Ki chatanu la Hashem. And it's our fault because we have sinned against God. Some of the Mefarshim say mei rosh is an interesting kind of poisonous, toxic beverage where you don't notice that something's off with the taste until you get the aftertaste of bitter almonds, of the arsenic, after you chug it on down. We went to the cities and found poisoned wells. We went for safety in numbers and found that it was easier to wipe us out. Pasuk Tesvav Periches we're in. Kaveh l'shalom ve'ein tov. Hashem kivisi l'negdi summit, right? But now kaveh l'shalom, we hoped for peace. Ve'ein tov, but no good came of it. How many decades of Israeli politics does that sound like? We hoped for peace in 1948. We'd offered a Palestinian state. Sorry for bringing contemporary politics into this, but Eretz Yisrael is a perfect example. In 1967, we wanted peace. We took Yerushalayim, but we offered all kinds of concessions. In Oslo, in the peace accords, in 1993 with Rabin, we had all of two-state solutions. We always hope for peace, kaveh l'shalom, but ve'ein tov. It's never going to come back good. Le'es marpeh. Marpeh, memresh pei hey, is actually read like memresh pei aleph, like a refuah. We hoped for a time of healing. V'hine ve'asa. But instead, terror and fear and troubles that cause us pain and anger. Instead of forgiveness of our chatoim, it's retribution for our chatoim. And this is really frightening because, again, the anticipation can be worse even than when it finally happens. The people of Eastern Europe during World War II did the same thing. They said, well, the Nazis are coming. Let's run to Warsaw. Let's run to Vilna. We'll be safe in the large Jewish communities. But, of course, what happened when the Nazis came to Warsaw and Vilna is exactly what happened to Jews everywhere under the Nazi boot. Tezayin midon nishma, from Dun, the north, always the north. Yirmiyahu told us in previous Haftoros that the troubles will come from the north. From the north, we hear nachras susav, the snorting and neighing of their horses. Now, we don't use horses in modern warfare, but we hear the rumble of the tanks, or we hear the low throb of the jet engines, or the missiles constantly being shot into Eretz Yisrael by those who would kill as many Jews as they can. Sometimes you hear the whine of the overhead bombs, or the sirens going off to tell people to seek shelter. There was a story in Israel in 1991 that there was a thunderstorm, and everybody, I think it was in Tel Aviv, everybody ran for the bomb shelters. They thought it was Saddam. They thought, remember the Iraqi war of the 1990s? Eretz Yisrael was under attack. Mikol mitzalos abirav, from the sound either of the neighing of their strong horses, their stallions, or the sound of their mighty giborim screaming like the rebel yell in the Civil War. Ra'asha kol haaretz, the whole earth trembled from the marching feet of the enemy. And we always expect Hashem will save us. But this time, vayavo'u vayochlu eretzum loa, and they came, and they devoured the entire land, and all of its produce, everything that it was full of. Eretzum loa, tevel v'yoshveva. That's brachos, except when it's not. Ir v'yoshveva. All of the cities, but the city always means Yerushalayim, and all those who dwelled inside. This is an eyewitness testimony of the Churban. This is Yirmiyahu telling us for 30 to 40 years it's coming. And then it came. And he is the recorder of the terrible deeds that were done in the Churban. And he doesn't say, I told you so. He's not made of that. But, if we had only listened. Yudzayin ki hineni mishaleach bochem. Right? We're taking psukim of positivity and turning them into darkness. Hine anochi shaleach lochem. Es Eliyahu hanavi. Hineni mishaleach bochem. Nechashim tzifonim. It's so many echoes of positive Jewish dreams, all crashing down and coming to nothing. I am sending against you serpents, nechashim, vipers, adders, poisonous serpents, whose touch is death. You can't get away. There are some snakes, garter snakes, harmless. There are some snakes, you get a snake bite, God forbid, but there's anti-venom, you'll be okay. But there are some snakes where it's all over the first second that it nibbles at you. Those are the ones coming. Asher ein lahem lochash. And there's a couple of pshatim about this, that they can't be charmed or drawn away. Lochash means whisper. Or they make no sound when they come. A rattlesnake at least warns you, try to get you out of the way. Not even a whisper when they come to kill you. V'nishchu eschem ne'um Hashem. And they're going to bite you, says God. Yudches, now Yirmiyahu reacts from his own deep emotion and sorrow over all this. Mavligi si. And some of the Mepharshim say this is a word that doesn't come up very often, if at all, in Tanakh. So Mavligi si, most say, if there was any way for me to repress my grief, if there was any way for me to not express it and just be silent, Yagon olai, libi davoy. But the problem is, within me, my heart is sick. I am heartsick. I am heartbroken. My grief can't be suppressed. There's no way to keep it down. There's no way to push it down. All of my own troubles, and for Yirmiyah especially, I told them how to fix this. And they just refused to listen. And they only wanted to hear false Nevi'im who promised that everything was great. There were signs. We mentioned yesterday, the scarlet wool does not turn white. There are stories in the Me'am Loes about how the gates from the Medrash and the Gemara, that the gates of the Beis HaMikdash open and close themselves. And Yirmiyah said, this is very bad omen. And the false Nevi'im said, oh, look, God is coming any minute. Everything's going great. The Babylonians will never come in. Remember that Chizkiyahu HaMelech 100 years earlier invited the Babylonians to come in and see the Kodesh Kodashim. Like with the Romans, we invite our own destruction, our own enemies into our inner sanctum. And then we're stunned when they use that to destroy us. Yotes, and a lot of this should sound like Eicha because it's the same writer and it's the same descriptions. Hine kol shavas basami. Listen to the voice from a distant land. Me'eretz marchakim. The shavas basami. The cry of the daughter of my people. Hine kol shavas basami me'eretz marchakim. The princess who was once a princess. The stories of the rich women scrabbling in the street for any bare ounce of food, and the women eating and killing their own children, which some say is a metaphor for destroying their own future. Ha'ashem ein b'Tzion. Is God not in Zion anymore? How is this possible? Im Malka ein ba? Is not her king Malka Mapikeh? Rabbi Woman loves Mapikehs. Is not her king, Yerushalayim's king, still in Yerushalayim? Of course not. Tzidkiyahu was exiled and had his eyes put out and all his children murdered. Madua hechisuni b'fsileihem behevlei nechar. So we're screaming out, Hashem ein b'tzion? Where's the king? Where's all the promises? You promised us everything was going to be great. And Hashem says, what have you been doing with yourselves for the last 200 years? Why did you enrage me with all of your avodah zarah? Behavlei nechar, with all of the vanities that were strange avodah zarah, strange values, strange technology. everything, unfortunately, we've been going on and on about all week in the Shiurim. So many other priorities than me, says Hashem. Ovar Katsir. The harvest time is over, has passed. Kala Kayitz. The summer is gone. We looked forward somehow. Harvest season is always a huge celebration. In every culture, harvest season is a huge celebration. People rejoice with the summer fruits and all the crops that they've taken in. The Katsir comes first, the reaping after Nisan. The gathering, the Chag HaAsif, comes over the course of the entire summer. And then comes Sukkot. And then Simcha, Simchas Torah. This Samachta B'Chagecha we sing over and over again. But the summer's gone. V'anachnu lo noshanu. And we have not been saved. What more blunt sentence could you possibly have for a complete lack of hope and total despair? The summer's gone, the harvest is gone, the crops are gone, the people are gone. We forget Eretz Yisrael has been desolate, sometimes for centuries at a time. We take it for granted. I was born in 1967. My kids tell me I am old. But I was born 3 months after Yerushalayim was taken and the Kotel was in Jewish hands. I have never lived when the Kotel was not in Jewish hands. I am fortunate. Millennia of Jews davened for the day Yerushalayim Ircha Baracham Im Tashuv. And we take it for granted. We hop on a plane, we go to Israel, we go whenever we want, and then when we get there, we kvetch. We kvetch about convenience, we kvetch about politics, we kvetch about everything. We are very much taking for granted something that people, for thousands of years, were praying for. But here, the summer's over and we're not saved. Al Shever Basami, says Yirmiyahu, brokenly himself, the brokenness of the daughter of my nation, Hoshbarti, I am broken. My people are wounded and I am wounded. My people's heart is sick. I am sick. The doom that came upon my people, Yirmiyahu more than any other Navi, felt exactly what we felt and expressed it. Kodarti, I mourn. Shama hechazikasni. And let me tell you, this is fun to learn from a cloth. Dismay, despair has taken hold of me. Hechazikani has grabbed me hold, has held me paralyzed. And then a beautiful phrase in the King James Bible, it's beautifully translated. In modern Bibles, like everything, it's inelegant and they really phrase it badly. Hatzori ein b'Gilad. Is there no balm in Gilad? Is there no soothing medicine from Gilad? The balm in Gilad has been used. The balm in Gilead, B-A-L-M, not B-O-M-B, God forbid. But the balm of Gilead is a literary device that's been used by many authors who steal it because it's beautiful. But Imrofei Ein Sham, the healer is not there. There's no doctor. You go up to Gilad. You say, Rashi says, are there any tzaddikim? Are there any righteous men for me to learn from up there? Maybe I can be healed. Anashim tzaddikim, mimi lilmod. V'yativu darchehem. And we're fortunate. We have Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. We have Rabbi Akiva. After the second Churban, for sure, we have a huge Torah Shabbal Peh corpus that saves us. And in fact, in the Ladino Pshat, on the first Asof Asifim, they say, Yirmiyahu the prophet said to Israel, for as much as they have transgressed the written law, Torah Shebechtav, sorry, a very bad Sephardic pronunciation, I Torah Shabbal Peh, we have transgressed the written law and the oral law. God says, I will cut them off. Not like the grapes of the vine gathered little by little, or the figs of the fig tree gathered one by one, but altogether fruit and leaves dragged down, trampled, and ruined, because they transgressed the holy law I gave them at Har Sinai. And they say all that while they're singing too. So I confess, I'm a little jealous of the Sephardim. Except during Elul, when they say an hour and a half of slichot every single morning and get up at 5 a.m. I am not jealous then. But rice on Pesach and beautiful singing sounds pretty good to me. But there's no balm in Gilad and there's no healer to heal us. Ki madua lo olsa aruchas basami. Why has the health of the daughter of my people not been restored? My beloved daughter, maybe a little spoiled, certainly raised in comfort, but there's no healing for her. Or God forbid, a child who is sick. What is the worst wound of a parent than a child who is sick and they can't find a cure and they can't be healed? I get these heart-wrenching emails from Chai Lifeline and places like that, and they're tzaddikim what they do for these kids, because to even think of it is painful. And on Tisha B'Av, it's all that we can think of. And finally, the last pasuk we'll do tonight, the end of Paraches, Me yitain roshi mayim. If only my head were a vessel full of water, which could then flow out, ve'eni makor dima, flow out as tears, as a fountain of tears. We have a similar phrasing, I think, in Perek Beis of Eicha. It's either Beis of Eicha or Dalet of Eicha. Look for it on Tisha B'Av night. Ve'evke yomam v'layla. I would weep day and night, Eis chalalei vasami, for all of the slain, all of the dead bodies of the daughter of my nation. Think about those giant burial places outside the concentration camps where they found mountains of Jewish bodies, all just thrown together. A room in Yad Vashem, the room of the shoes. I haven't seen it myself, because when we went to Yad Vashem when I was a teenager, I was about to go in and I fainted. I guess I'm a delicate, sensitive kid. I couldn't. I was overwhelmed by Yad Vashem. But the room of the shoes, 1.2 million children under the age of 12 were massacred by the Nazis. That's the Chalalei Basami. And multiply that by hundreds of events. The Inquisition, the pogroms, the Crusades, all of the things we say kinos about. All of it is here in the Haftorah of Tisha B'Av. It is beyond being able to bear, which is why we can only lay at Tisha B'Av morning when we're at the peak of our Shiva. Meis mutal lefanav. Our body is just laid out in front of us, and we can do nothing but weep. By the Mincha time, we can't lay like this anymore. It's unsustainable for a human being who's not in the midst of suffering to be able to keep that level and still come out with any hope at all. The afternoon of Tisha B'Av is much more hopeful. That's why we say the Tefillah in Shemona Esrei Nachem, where we say Hashem should give us Nechama and should build Yerushalayim and Sion. It has its own ending to the bracha. Notice we don't say Nachem in Shacharis or the previous Ma'ariv, because we're not ready for it yet. We can't, and Hashem's not listening. The gates of Tefillah are closed, and nothing we say is going to have an impact. It's truly devastating, this Haftorah, and I hope it's coming across. With all of the words in it, it can be a little difficult, but the feelings in Yirmiyahu are what always matter. So that's it for tonight. That's the first leg of the Haftorah Al Sof HaSifim, and we'll continue tomorrow night and, God willing, Thursday night, and wrap it up.